you ready to branch out, to take a leap of faith, to love yourself and others fully? Then let go of whatever no longer serves you to take action now on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Erica will energize and excite you to power up your passionate dream that sets your soul on fire. With Erica's E3 approach, equipping, empowering, and enlightening yourself so you can be yourself for yourself. Get ready and get rooted to live a life without regrets, without what ifs, without should haves, and especially without empty feelings from a life unexplored. This hit show helps you build powerful and intentional roots to live it up, love it up, and let it go. Get fearlessly ready and powerfully rooted in your yes with your host, Erica Gifford Mills, and be fearless about your more and stand in your yes. Now on Get Rooted Radio.
Welcome, everyone. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. A big shout out, as always, to my producer today, Nat. Nat, how you doing?
I'm doing good today, Erica. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day from one sassy lass to a sassy lad. I am really excited and apologize for any of you listeners out there. I am a little bit hoarse. Mother Nature's being finicky here in Wisconsin. We go from over 70 degrees on Saturday, and I got 5 inches of snow on Sunday. So the weather has not been kind to me, and so I think it's gotten me a little bit of a cold. But today we are going to rise. Just like I'm going to rise above this cold, we're going to be rising resilient. And this is a survivor's journey to healing and hope. So during today's episode, my guest, Tammy Adcock, shares her powerful journey from surviving a high conflict divorce and custody battle to becoming a fierce advocate for abuse survivors. She exposes the reality of family court, the challenges of co-parenting with a narcissist, and the resilience required to heal. Through her story, she offers hope and empowerment, proving that transformation is possible even after the darkest of battles. Thank you so much, Tammy, for being on the show today. And I'd like to tell listeners a little bit about you. You're the founder and CEO of Adcock Coaching, LLC, which specializes in helping abuse survivors navigate the high conflict divorces with clarity, confidence, and resilience. So you empower your clients to reclaim their voices, set strong boundaries, and listeners, you know I love those boundaries, and thrive beyond their circumstances. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited.
So let's talk about the breaking point, your breaking point, how your journey began.
Well, my journey began, I saw little pieces of control, manipulation, things like that. But at the point in time, that was not really a hot topic. You don't have heard narcissism used a lot more now, sometimes in the correct contents and sometimes not. So, people say, okay, couples argue, couples fight, whatever. But the breaking point for me was when it began to include the children. And so it was more of a situation where I didn't want them growing up in a home where there was alcohol. That was very important to me. Or where there was a lot of fighting and yelling. I have been very blessed to grow up in a home where my parents have been married for 52 years. So, I grew up in a home where I felt very loved, very safe. And I wanted the same for my children. So one night there had been numerous moments where the cops had been called out to our home. But one night it had just gotten so bad. I just didn't know what else to do. So I decided to take a short drive. There had really never been any incidences that I had deemed concerning directly with the children. And I just realized that night that I needed to get out. I didn't know exactly where I would start, but luckily my family reached out to me and they said, whatever you need, we are here for you, but you need to take care of those babies. So I turned my car around and I went back to my home to find that my 3 children had been locked in a room and I was not allowed to see them. And the only thing I'd ever wanted to be in life was a mother. So that was the only thing that mattered to me. It wasn't career aspirations, wealth, anything like that. It was just being a mother. And so the next thing I ended up having to do, I tried multiple times to speak with the individual and say, I just need to know that the children are safe. So I had to end up calling the police. The police came out, and a lot of it is just a little bit blurry of what happened next. But the kids and I were safe that night. And just within a matter of days, I filed for custody to temporarily move to a different location. So the children and I moved at that point in time. But for a lot of the people that I work with, again, a protective parent can be either a mother or a father. And so their breaking point is typically their kids. It's amazing how much we tend to take ourselves, but then when it comes to our child, there is no, it's just protect your child.
Yeah. No, I when you were telling your story, that's the first thing I thought is that we take a lot on as a husband or wife, right? Depending on the scenario. But when it comes to our kids, it's we will put up with something, but we won't allow for them to put up with it. And, that's when we have to be able to recognize that and protect not only yourself, but protect your children. So I know, when did you first recognize the abuse, right? When did you first get that and then struggle with the impact of the family court and the protection of your children?
Well, when I first had a glimpse of it, my oldest child was still an infant at the time. And without going into a lot of detail, there was some concern that they would, him and his family would take the minor child out of the state and not return them. And so again, like I said, we'll tolerate a lot for ourselves, not for our kids. And so I immediately filed for a protection order that would protect my child. And so that was when I first realized that this was not only just going to be in a battle with an abuser, but everybody that, as we hear many times, enables the abuser. Yeah. And so I knew that, I had to start looking into this, but again, in the fog of things, they know how to change the narrative, and they were going to make the situation so bleak for not being able to feel like I could protect my child at all times. So at that point in time, I did decide to go back. And then we had the rest of our family. So I knew it was there, but again, in trying to protect my child, it just prolonged the situation, I guess you can say. And so not really until after I was out and it had been a bit, it was an acquaintance of somebody on social media. And they said, I think you're dealing with narcissism. I'd never heard that before. I'd never heard the word. And so when I went to look up like personality disorders, I don't know exactly. I was just basically piddling around. And I thought, well, this doesn't really give a definition. So that was nice of her. I know she's trying to help. How sweet. And I wasn't willing to acknowledge it at that point in time. Well, shortly thereafter, I decided to do some real research and took the quizzes. And when the quizzes basically came 8 out of 10 and 18 out of 20, I knew that there was something that I had to recognize what was really going on with the mind games and the love bombing and the gaslighting. And like I said, it takes years for you to really see the whole picture. So that was kind of the beginning.
And then how effective or the impact? What about the impact of the family court? Were they helpful? Was it something that was hard to get through?
They talk about the divorce and, what a difficult time that is for families, specifically when children are involved. But many times they say the courts will give you about 1 or 2 year grace period. And that's what they consider a cooling off period where, emotions are high, families get involved, they take sides. So I was under that understanding that things would cool off. I remember saying, I forgive you for the things that you've done. Just be a good dad. And we can probably just, make this co-parent thing work. What I didn't realize is the divorce is kind of like icing on a cake when it comes to the whole process. The after post-separation abuse is what most describe as hell on earth. And that's really what it's been. I know that there is a lot of people that have the titles of family court professionals. However, in doing a lot of my own research, I found that the domestic violence professionals have a hard time, I guess you would say, understanding narcissistic abuse to them because it's like nothing else that they will ever see. And so I found it to be more of they dealt with a lot of charm from the abuser, and that's all that mattered to them. To them, charm was okay. And there's a false narrative out there that just because they abused you doesn't mean they're not a good parent. And that is absolutely false. In fact, over 60% of abusers, male or female, if they have been domestic abusers, will abuse their children in some form or fashion, whether it be psychological, physical, sexual, emotional. And so I found that to be a very big lacking hole in the family court system.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the battle within. But before we go, Tammy, tell folks how they can connect with you.
Well, there's several different ways. But adcockcoachingllc.com is my website. That does have all my social media handles on it. You can call me 531-310-1061, or you can email me adcockcoaching@gmail.com. But again, the website is the main contact point where you can, I gave all the ways that you can contact me, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Thank you, Tammy. You're listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any portion of today's episode, you can catch it on getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com. Don't forget to subscribe online to receive the latest news, events, specials, and words of encouragement. Go to getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Tammy Adcock. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yes, thank you.
So during the last segment, we discussed your breaking point. And during this segment, we're going to explore the battle within. And what I want to talk about is that battle that we have within us, right? The navigating the trauma, maybe those smear campaigns, and the emotional toll of a high conflict divorce. So let's just start with the first, the navigating the trauma, or even ideas of trauma. And I think we all know that this is a generalization. This doesn't mean it's happening everywhere. It could be men or women that go through this. So, but in your situation and what you've seen with your clients, what does that battle within include?
That battle within includes the lack many times of getting the proper help. So anytime a parent, especially a parent that loves their child, is separated from them, there's going to be some level of separation anxiety, parent and child. Many, if they start when the child is very young, the courts a lot of times have said, you know what, we don't care if you're nursing, pump, get a bottle, things like that. So when you've got children too that are being ripped away from a primary parent, and they're bawling and screaming not to go. I mean, I've heard so many of these stories, kids hiding under the bed, kids hiding under a table. That's just another level of trauma on top of itself. And then many times, to add another layer of abuse, the abuser will cut off all contact with that parent while they're on the other person's parenting time, whether the court order says they can or can't. It's, this is what I'm going to do. So you would think, okay, get these people into therapy, play therapy for the kids, EMDR, whatever. However, in a continued court battle, therapy records come up, things are said that it should have been kept confidential. And so it's trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And that's what I see is the biggest barrier for people to actually successfully advocate for themselves is that there's not time to heal. And I've seen a huge thing in our community, and I didn't realize it until I experienced it myself. There's a lot of autoimmune disorders that come from trauma. One that I have is called vitiligo. And I didn't get it until the worst point in my case. One day I had my skin, a month later, I didn't. So the trauma just does so many different things to the body. And that's where I see a lot of clients struggling with that.
So now, we're learning how to navigate that trauma, and there's all sorts of different types of trauma that can come up. What about the emotional tolls or the unfortunate other things that go on during a very high conflict divorce?
Many times there's a lot of what they said, post-separation abuse. So for example, financial. If they can continue to get you in court, they can continue to financially drain you, into the point where I've seen some clients that have done a first, a second mortgage on their home, thinking that eventually the courts will see, what's harming the children. There's the mental and emotional abuse. A lot of times you see a lot of stalking because of today's day and age. A lot of it is social media stalking, trackers. So when we're talking about trying to successfully be in the court system when you're not okay, that is so difficult for individuals. There is a lot of new help coming out, but we still have a lot to go.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to understand all those tracking ways that you can be tracked, right? Especially if you are in an abusive relationship or you're trying to end an abusive, there are so many ways that you can unwillingly let people know where you're at. I mean, that's good advice for anybody in anything, because sometimes we don't know when we're being followed or stalked or anything like that, or just away from your home. So, education, and we'll get into that, I think, next. I don't want to give anything away. So next segment, we will talk about, how do we use that knowledge as power. And I think it's in anything we do, but especially when you're going through high stress, high trauma, high emotional, that can make us additional things happen, our health, our wellness. We need to fight back with power, right? As opposed to fighting back in necessarily other ways. So what would you say when individuals are going through that? What would be some good tips for them, or resources, help that they should be making sure that they get?
Well, first of all, I talked to them about, again, how you talk about if a plane was going down, would you put the oxygen on someone else? You would obviously put the oxygen on in order to help someone else. And so because I know that their main focus is their children, we talk a lot about self-care, because if they're not able to help themselves, they will not be able to successfully help their children. Many times in court, they look at you as emotional, or the hovering parent is one of the names I hate the most. But they say that because you're frantic. And so when we talk about calming your mood, whether it be your favorite playlists, many of these women that I work with have been down to the bare minimum of the ability to pay for a place to live, basic groceries, basic clothing. And so I talk about a lot of free things that they can do, or inexpensive things, a face scrub, taking a walk, picking a playlist of favorite music, things like that. But I also talk about being in the moment with your kids. So when it's not something that you can currently do at that moment, just be there. That is what your kids are going to remember. They're not going to remember what brand of shoes they got you, or that you spent $100 on a haircut or $1,000 on a party. They're going to remember the things. I remember one of my children said, when we come home, I just know the other neighbors are jealous because I would cook beans overnight to make for, burritos and enchiladas. And they said, that's what we remember from our childhood. So we talk a lot in very great depth of when you have to communicate with that high conflict person, use office hours, 8 to 5. It's not a 24-hour thing, because as we know, we can't just go. Our bodies need time for rest.
Absolutely. And those small things matter, right? And those small things for you and for your kids, those things matter. And as you said, they're going to remember that you read to them at night. You had the quality time, not necessarily the quantity, because we all know that we could spend a lot of time with somebody, and if it's not quality, because you're not there in the moment, you're not paying attention, it's not as good. But taking the time to take care of yourself, and your analogy is spot on, is making sure that you do put your oxygen mask on first, because you cannot pour from an empty cup, and you need to be there and take care of yourself and ensure that you're set to take care of the other individuals. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about reclaiming power. Before we go, Tammy, tell folks how they can connect with you and learn more about your services.
Again, everybody kind of gets from a different area. So I've made it, if you go straight to my website, adcockcoachingllc.com, you will find all my social media handles, and invite you to follow me on those. If you'd like a phone call, 531-310-1061. And again, if you would like to email, adcockcoaching@gmail.com.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Don't forget to visit getrootedradio.com to listen to a replay of this episode, sign up for helpful tips, and learn about upcoming events. That's getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Tammy Adcock. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So during the last two segments, we've talked about the breaking point and the battle within. And then during this segment, we're going to talk about reclaiming power. And I think that is so important when you're going through any sort of tough time, but especially in a divorce and in a high conflict divorce, especially on how do we have that turning point to reclaim our power. And in our discussions before the show, you had talked about finding the courage, using the knowledge as power, and rebuilding from the ashes. Can you give us a little bit more on each one of those?
Just like I said, in coming back, when we look at society, unfortunately, women a lot of times have kind of trampled on each other to get where they're going. And for me, I always thought when one woman wins, we all win, right? And so that was my thing. I said, I want to be that individual that I know what it was like to go this journey alone, because there was divorce coaches weren't even heard of, much less high conflict divorce coaches were heard of when I started my battle all those many years ago. And so luckily, I had been put in contact with somebody who had gone through the same situation I had. She had been coaching, and she said, I want to go on the advocacy side. So I would like to start a coaching school, and I would like to give you guys basically all the clients, depending on what state you're in. And I thought, what better thing could I do? Because I had spent years and years and years reading and educating and empowering myself to know what things were, to know legal terms, to know just the whole, if I could get a book about it, I was reading it. And so my real turning point came, my father is a minister, and his motto was just one more soul, Lord. And so I thought, that is my favorite human, I say. And so I thought that is what it's going to be, just one more survivor, one more survivor. And so each person that comes to me, I feel like they haven't just found me by chance. And I'm very humbled by the people that said, I don't know how I would have done this had I not found you. So that's where a lot of my empowerment, healing, all of that tied into one comes from each family that I help.
And that is beautiful. And I think it's, especially when you're dealing, and I'm not to diminish or make small physical abuse, because that is a true problem. But when it's emotional, psychological, verbal, that they leave no external marks, that can be very difficult, because people sometimes believe, one, that it's not happening because they can't physically see it. Or two, the maybe abusee, right? The person who's being abused, the victim, and I hate to say victim because they're survivors, but victims they think that, well, maybe I'm just overreacting, or how do I prove that, right? And where we need to find the courage to say this isn't right. And I always say, would I say that to my friend? Would I say that to my son? Would I say that? And if the answer is no, I wouldn't say that, then it shouldn't be said to me. Or I shouldn't say it, right? On the other hand, but when you have to reclaim your power and you don't have the knowledge, because for years, this is how it's been, you do need to educate yourself. You need to reach out and find that help. Especially because, we have, right? I wouldn't try to fix a plumbing or electrical issue on my own. I'm not knowledgeable there. So when we're looking into the legal world, we should reach out to those contacts and find those individuals so that we can have an advocate, especially when everyone around us, or potentially everyone around us, doesn't see what's going on. Because I always say there's three sides of the story. There's yours, there's theirs, and then there's some place in the middle where it's all really happening, because it's perspective, right? So how does people gain that power to rebuild from the ashes? Besides reaching out to have contacts, have there been resources that you have found extra helpful so that somebody knows, wow, I've been put into this conflict. Now I have realized this. I have realized that this is an issue. Where's the first place they should turn?
Well, the first place is, I tell people, there's so many resources online to look. Obviously, you want to look for the credibility of the person who's doing it. What is their background? Because, everybody can tell a story, but the background that goes with it. For example, with my story, there's a lot of background with the police department, with the short incarceration, with the protection order. So that's the background that people, when they talk to somebody. But I guess one of the first times when I went to a group, I looked around the room and I really thought that all those people possibly could have dated my husband. And the reason why is because there is a pattern when it comes to personality disordered abuse. And so a lot of the phrases are comparable. A lot of the things sound the same. And I love how you pushed on the point of because you didn't see a mark, maybe it didn't happen. One of the key go-to statements that I will always remember was, "You're not abused. I haven't thrown you down the stairs."
Yeah.
So if I had been thrown down the stairs, then I probably would have had, the police come out and it would have kind of been whatever they want to call slam dunk. But because I was scared to stand by a set of stairs, so they used that intimidation tactic. And that to me stands in your mind and in your overall being way past seeing a broken leg or a concussion. Again, like you said, not to minimize the physical part, but that's where a lot of it comes from. So some of my go-to resources have been look in your local community, see if there's a support group. Again, making sure that they have strict rules on confidentiality. That's very, very important, especially if you're in the middle of a case and you need to make sure that what you stay in there stays in the group. Barry Goldstein, I would say he's the end all be all of adverse childhood experiences. And that's what happens to children that see domestic abuse throughout their childhood, teens. So just some of the main resources, I carry most of mine on my shelves. So if anybody wants to see them or just wants to reach out for a list, I provide a list as well.
I think that's very helpful because sometimes people don't know you don't know what you don't know in
Right.
anything, right? And I think when individuals aren't sure, they don't know because they don't know where to start. They have that, it's that fight, flight, freeze. And it's that freeze. Like, I don't know what to do now. I'm paralyzed. And so it's so overwhelming. I'm just not even going to start. And that's where a lot of individuals get stuck. And if we can help them get that information, that's so important. So what would be
a lot of times,
Okay.
sorry, a lot of times it's hard for them to read because of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so we do have like audio ways to also help them because that's a trauma response.
So what is one last takeaway that you could give individuals for reclaiming their power?
I always say own it. There is so many women and men, fathers and mothers standing behind that person that when they take that first move to say, you know what, I'm here to reclaim my power, there is gobs of us standing behind you, beside you, saying, we've got you. And that is the biggest thing, is just owning your story. It's a beautiful thing every single time I see it. So we support you.
Yep. And I think that's important because you would be surprised what your journey can do for somebody else. And
Yes.
So take that first step and own it. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to finish out the show with a discussion on lighting the way. This is Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any of the information during the last segments, go to getrootedradio.com to listen to the replay. Don't forget to subscribe, sign up for tips and special events and pricing for upcoming coaching sessions at getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Tammy Adcock. Tammy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yes, thank you.
So tell listeners how they can outreach to you to get some of these resources that we've talked about, to talk to you about services, and just really learn about your different platforms.
You can reach out to me by email, adcockcoaching@gmail.com. A few of the things that I offer there is I will try and find you local resources to you, because even though my home base is in Nebraska, I do work in all 50 states. And so we also do have support groups. So I try and line you up with that support group. And then I have a toolkit for court. And so those are free. So all you have to do is just email and request one. I'll send that to you. If I have a referral of somebody, depending on the in-depth of your case, I might refer you to one of my sister coaches that it may be a little bit closer if you'd like to have more of, instead of online, but in-person sessions. So I always try and make it work for you depending on your situation. And then again, the website, adcockcoachingllc.com, has all my social media handles. TikTok is where I do a lot. LinkedIn, more of a professional, if other professionals are working with the family, engaging that way. But TikTok and YouTube for the short videos, because I know a lot of times either we're busy running off, especially as a single parent. And so just maybe 3 minutes may just trigger something to help empower you to the next stage of your journey.
And that is a lot of information that folks can get out there and free. So please look her up, go see what she has to offer if you are in need of those services. So during the last few segments, we discussed breaking points, the battles that we have within, and how we reclaim our power. And during this last segment, we're going to talk about lighting the way. And when we say lighting the way, we're talking about the advocacy, the coaching, using your personal experience really to inspire others, right? It's like I said before we went to break, it's many times our own journeys can be a survival guide for somebody else. And that's what we're talking about by lighting the way. What have you seen, not only yourself, because you're a great example of how you're lighting the way for others, but what have you seen with some of your other clients that were able to light the way for others?
Well, I can think of one in particular, actually, that just finished their battle. And we had a discussion, and they are now going back to school, but they want their focus to be in helping families that typically get lost in the shuffle of just everybody wants you to co-parent. They don't consider anything that it might be unhealthy, that it might be more traumatic for families. And she wants to go into the courthouses and testify on behalf of cases like this. And I truly believe if she had not been in the situation she was, again, that's many times where we find where our purpose is. And I really never thought, like, one of my go-to people is Joyce Myers. And I remember when she talked about her abuse, and I turned my head and I thought, I can listen to this lady because she must get it. And from there, I just remember all little tidbits of how she said, people look at me funny, but if I had not gone through this, she goes, I would not change a thing. And I thought, man, I could never get to that point, but I can sit here today and tell you that I am. I know it sounds weird, but I'm thankful for the abuse because it led me to my purpose in life. I love what I do. I love the stories, the success. When the light bulb goes on for a survivor and their children, and just the engagement that I've heard from other people that have gone through this as well, the things that they've learned about themselves that they might not learn otherwise.
Yeah, and that's very true. It's sometimes we have to go through a dark place to find the light that was meant for us. Mm-hmm. And I always think there's this quote that we have to let go of the life that we expected to live the life that we need and we're born to live. And even, when you think about it, individuals who've had a very tough upbringing, who've gone through abuse, or they have had maybe drug addictions, they have had these different things. The people that they are today is because of their past. So I always tell people, if you love me today, you don't have to like everything I went through, but it was because of that, why you love me today, because that's the person I am. And so you may not like the things that I've done or where I've been, but if I didn't have those experiences, I wouldn't be here today. And I think when you can take those negative experiences and turn them around to a positive, and I hate to say this, we used to joke that oh my gosh, I'm using the O word again. That's an opportunity. You're growing. It's an opportunity to learn something. Yes, you might have failed, but what did you learn from it? And we always laughed because the O word was a swear word. Oh gosh, mom's using the opportunity word again. But it is. If we can grow from it and we can learn from it, then it's okay that we failed. It's okay that we make a mistake. It's those repeated things over and over and over again where we don't. And I think that the advocacy that you're doing and that other people can do, and using those personal experiences to inspire hope, empowerment, and change for others, it's what we need in this world overall. So, I appreciate what you're doing. How can others turn that into something positive? What is one thing that you say, or even three things that you say to your clients that empower them to make that change and don't dwell on the negative that they've had experienced?
Well, I think a lot of times I use what one of my children said to me many years ago when I got vitiligo. And there was a song that came on the radio. It said, "I'm thankful for the scars, because without them, I wouldn't know who you are." And they grabbed my arm and they said, "Those are your scars for fighting for us." And so to me, I turned that into an empowerment. And I thought, if I ever say anything negative about that, I'm undermining what I was told. And so I tell them two things. One, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And when you know better, do better. Because many survivors are so hard on themselves. How could I ever have not seen the red flags? How could I have ever said I do? And it's not about that. But now that you've seen those red flags and what could lead to unhealthy, toxic relationships, now in a light, fluffy way, go do better.
Yeah. Well, and it's true, because if you don't know the signs, right? If you don't know the signs, or sometimes when you're so close, what is that? You can't see the forest through the trees. When you're so close and you're in there, you can't see it. And it's when you take a moment to step back and, okay, now you know. So we can go and we can change that. And it's hard. Sometimes people say, and I think they mean well, but they say, "You didn't see the red flags." Well,
Right.
it wasn't like I was going to a carnival, right? It wasn't like I was going to a fair that I was looking for the red flags. You don't always see them because you maybe want to see the best in a person, or they're so good at manipulating that you just don't see it.
That's it, the manipulation.
Is there any last bits of information for our listeners that you want to share?
I always say that, coming out, I remember this post I just recently made, and I said, superheroes don't always wear capes. And you have no idea what kind of superhero you can be in someone else's story. And so many times they say compassion beats depression. And so when you're feeling down, or, I could have, should have, would have, think of it as, who's watching? Is it my next door neighbor that's struggling with the situation? Is it my children that wonders if, will this ever get better because my mom seems sad or my dad seems sad all the time? Think about how you can turn it around to help the next person. Because when we become a generation of where, after we, like I said, come out of the fire, we go back in carrying the buckets to help the next person, that's the best thing I can say to do.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you all for tuning in to Get Rooted Radio. If you missed any part of today's episode or want to listen again, go to getrootedradio.com for the podcast. And don't forget to tune in the first and third Monday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. Remember to ask yourself, are you living a rooted life with the appropriate boundaries, remembering to thrive and not just survive? Are you the hero of your story? If those answers are no, Then set up your free Empower Hour call with me. No charge, no obligations. Go to GetRootedRadio.com to find out how I can help you take action. And if you are ready to live, love, and let go, then my award-winning book and companion workbook, The Rooted Life, Live, Love, Let Go, is for you. Check out the bundled deal at GetRootedRadio.com under the author section. Also, check out my new collaboration work, Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 16, endorsed by Tony Robbins. Order your copies online today. And one last personal message. If you are hurting or you need help, please know the world needs you, and it is a better place with you in it. Don't let the hard days win. Reach out for assistance. Call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. That's 988. Hours are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the cost is free. Or text HOME 741-741 to reach a trained crisis counselor through Crisis Text Line, which is a global not-for-profit organization. Again, 24/7, and it is confidential. Thank you for tuning in. Have an amazing day. Know that you are loved, and I'm looking forward to the next time on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go.
Thank you for listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Visit GetRootedRadio.com if you've missed any part of this hit show, and tune in on TransformationTalkRadio.com to live fearlessly in your more and powerfully rooted in your unlimited yes. For more information and to work with Erica directly, visit GetRootedRadio.com. That's GetRootedRadio.com, and get ready to live it up, love it up, and let it go.